This is ultimately about protecting the vulnerable and particularly LGBT young people and old people from harm. And until the Evangelical Alliance recognise that harm, which Peter still hasn't done in churches today, he's talked about historic abuse, but he doesn't recognise that his current teaching causes many young and old LGBT people to consider taking their lives. And until that is acknowledged and dealt with, until the recognition that they are not showing a gospel of love to LGBT people, but discriminating against them, I think we will continue to have this sort of bumping up against each other. I think ultimately, as Christians, what we need to do is to show compassion, love, and protection for those in our care. And when we refuse to hear the voices of those crying out to us for help, then God will have something very, I think, harsh to say to us, but that's one for conscience. Ultimately, the law is clear that religious practice, religious freedom must be curtailed if harm is done. And that's why this is not in the Canadian law is not in breach of the European Convention, because there are very clear exceptions. And we are saying that this harm, which everyone knows about, frankly, most people in evangelical churches can see the impact that this teaching is having on those around them. And they want to see a world where we are safeguarded and we are safe. And I would like to add celebrated.
I absolutely agree on the safeguarding and safe, but sorry, but Jane's gone to a fairly key point. We can disagree on the law all day long, and I disagree entirely with that interpretation of the Canadian piece. But there's quite a central piece in there. Logically, Jane, that has to lead to a banning of conservative evangelical teaching on sexuality and marriage. That's the only logical conclusion from what you've said. Because what you're saying is, if I can finish the question for a second.
You constantly put words in my mouth, and I'm going to push back.
Well, no, but logically, I genuinely, Jane, don't understand how it can be anything but. You've just said that what the Evangelical Alliance says is discriminatory, it's hurtful, it's harmful. So I'm saying, yes. So logically, just to be crystal clear, you therefore have to be calling for a ban for evangelical theology on sex and marriage.
And that's what you keep saying I am, which is why I find when you talk about...
I don't keep saying
you have constantly. When I've written... Well, I'll send you the articles where you have said. You said that we can't preach or teach the word of God. And that is absolutely ridiculous, because that is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying...
So why would you allow that when you say it's harmful?
Because I'm saying that...
Draw the distinction between that and the prayer.
I mean, Justin, do you want to come in?
Well, let's just finish this and then we'll...
Peter has constantly said that I'm saying that you can't preach the gospel, which is absolutely untrue. And that's why I feel a lot about this. When he says that truth is an issue, I'd say, go back and look at what you've constantly been accusing me of. I believe that you can have differing opinions. I don't believe that they are right ideology. But when you start practicing on LGBT people and telling them in prayer that who they are is wrong and or needs to be suppressed or changed, that is harmful. And it's the harm that we need to be protected against. It is spiritual abuse, and we need to define spiritual abuse. For me, it's not even prayer, it's hate prayer, because it doesn't.
What I hear Peter saying, I think, Jane, is that as far as he can see, the fact that you believe just the teaching, the holding of this theology in a church is itself harmful would then also mean that should be banned. I think his concern is it's not.
There is a case for hate preaching at some point. It depends how it's held. But I understand and respect, and you think you'll read in all my blogs that I respect there is a conscience clause. I don't think LGBT people should be in those churches, because I think that ultimately they find it very offensive. But that in itself is not what the ban conversion therapy legislation is about. This is about the practice aimed at an individual that seeks to change, cure, or suppress their sexual orientation and gender identity. We've been very clear about that. We've been constantly focused on that and trying to...
Okay. Final thought then, Peter, and
people will be able to listen back. But I'm genuinely just trying to... I thought you just said the Evangelical Alliance's positions were harmful in and of themselves, what was in our affirmations, and so to teach that would be harmful. I'm genuinely trying to understand the distinction. I am now confused. I haven't accused you of these things before, I don't believe, but I'm happy now because I think you've just said the teaching is harmful I know this is not what this legislation is about, but logically I don't understand why you say the prayer is harmful and the teaching is harmful, but I want to ban the prayer, but the teaching's okay. What am I missing? I genuinely am confused.
Well, then pray for a bit of insight, Peter, because I think ultimately what your problem is that you're refusing to acknowledge the harm that you have caused so many people. And I think until
in the teaching and positions.
Well, there's two things here, aren't there? Is what is the ban conversion therapy that we're legislation that we're focused on, and that is the practice of trying to change, cure, or suppress someone. Now, your teaching, yeah, I personally do believe it's harmful, but that is not to do with this legislation. I do think that is not godly. I don't think it's what the gospel calls for. I don't think it's Christian, actually. But then that's why I wrote the Via Media piece that I did. Because I think
I suppose Peter's question then, in a sense, to you, Jane, is: would you like to see similar legislation at some point in the future to ban?
And I've been very clear about that. I think that's called freedom of expression and freedom of religion. I think it's wrong.
Okay. So to answer your question, Peter, it sounds like Jane is saying, yes, she does believe the positions and teaching is harmful, but she's not seeking legislation on that, whereas she is obviously for this type of what she would call conversion therapy, talking therapy.
So that is definitely helpful and confusing at the same time, if you like, because it's not the harmfulness of the prayers that's going to be the problem, because the theology is also harmful in the teaching. That's where the why ban one bit and say the other bit's okay? So the fear is the teaching's next, or it's just illogical to separate the two bits out. I think that's absolutely fair. So that's an observation I'll make.
It's about practice aimed at an individual with a predetermined purpose, and that is different to holding a belief. And that is, that's the reality of a situation.
I know it is now, but both are harmful.
For more conversations between Christians and skeptics, subscribe to the Unbelievable podcast. And for more updates and bonus content, sign up to the Unbelievable newsletter.